Hey, welcome back to another episode of Ecommerce On Tap, brought to you by Sourcify. I'm your host, Nathan Resnick, and today we're joined by Jason from the iTristan group. Jason, thanks so much for coming on.
You, Nathan. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I want to start because I know you really focus on digital transformation and how do you make these e-commerce businesses more efficient. We were just talking a bit about cash flow and the current situation that a lot of these brands are in. We were talking about NetSuite or SAP and all those backend systems. What's going on with the macro and economic trends in terms of what's happening with these businesses?
We don't tend to get the stories, up front because businesses don't want to tell us. But there are concerns going on. I think it's more mood. My sense that it tends to be mood more than actual, reality in some cases. But mood is, perception is reality so often. I can't really speak to the real cash flow situation, but it does seem that there are concerns that it might be not drying up, but easing up. So from our point of view is to make things so efficient that business owners, not that they don't worry, but that they at least don't have to worry about oversupplying inventory, over keeping inventory, and this kinds of things. So that's where we come in. Is how do we optimize this? Get the stuff out the door.
Makes sense. I feel like so many businesses now have too much in inventory, too much cash tied up in inventory. How do you go about, forecasting, especially when the economy changed so quickly from growing so fast in the e-commerce industry to, it's still growing a bit, but, obviously a lot of these brands have slowed down a bit and now have too much cash in inventory.
Our position is always one ahead of that. Like our position is always in terms of the automation space, the commerce meets supply chain automation space, is to give them the place where they can say in advance just what you said. Is it looks like this is coming up. Like the forecasting has been done. That's been done by their supply chain managers, inventory managers, and so forth. But from there out to the consumer experience, the customer experience, is what do you do about that in advance? And our job is to automate that. Like we want to give the brand managers, whether it's the marketing managers, the brand managers, and so forth, all the way down that chain, we want to give them the power to come out in advance and say, look, let's automate that oversupply. If that oversupply is hitting a critical level, it's the opposite of ordering. It's selling. If they're past a critical level of in stock, do we need to take action on the customer experience side? Maybe they should be promoted, and maybe we should not be waiting for humans to take action, especially in large scale businesses. You want your systems to push what's necessary. So if you have an overstock situation, maybe your systems should be able to act on that.
Makes sense.
And
And I'm curious, I mean, in terms of what you do at the iTristan group, what does that look like? A business comes to you and says, hey, we see a gap in our forecasting, we see a gap in our supply chain, we see a gap in terms of how we're shipping our products to our customers. What's kind of your main focal point at iTristan group?
our main focal point is in that case is the math. Like what we're looking for is that in the problem, and this is kind of one of our philosophies, is let's dive into the hard question first. And what is the math behind what does it mean to be oversupplied? And mathematically, I mean, I know the principles are always the same, but mathematically, each business tends to come to us with slightly different stories, and their vision of what is oversupply is just mathematically just a little bit different than the next guy, the next guy, the next guy, even though the principles are the same. So what we want to know is what they define oversupply is as, and if their exposure is at X, 2X, 3X, or even 0.5, we want to know what that means. And once we can get that math figured out, then trickle it all the way up, and then we can create the situation where we are responding to that stock situation mathematically, and build it from there, because then from there you can get scale. The moment you define that mathematical definition, you can scale. And this is the thing that we find, even the biggest, Nathan, the biggest businesses, like name brands that they aren't doing this. And I think that's the thing that first kind of hit me. It's like, wait a minute, you guys don't know how to do this, do you? And it was at that point that we realized, okay, we've got to define this at scale so you guys can put this into a model that can run with it. And it's at that point that we started, seeing, inventory movement at the best time.
I feel like it is an equation, and it's such a hard equation because there's so many variables, right? And you're pulling in data from, Shopify into your NetSuite, into your, 3PL partners, logistics panel. And it's hard to, I guess, digest all of that data to forecast and create a formula in a very efficient manner. And so I'm curious, I mean, how would you think a brand should go about this if they're facing this type of challenge that you're describing?
It's strip it down to the first principles as much as possible. You need, especially if you haven't done this ever or haven't done this for a long time in your business, you need to actually bring down the principles of who decides what and where. Just like you said, if your ecosystem has only two parties, okay, that's one thing. Does it have three? Does it have a four? Are you at the mercy of, in some cases, are you at the mercy of suppliers? And this really it really hit home in COVID, Nathan. I mean, you've probably heard this, where supply chains got so disrupted that what was an obvious shipment from China to Los Angeles to Kansas turned into a month, 2 month long nightmare. And so if you go, you can go down your food chain quite far, but that's the point of what, to answer your question, is what are the first principles of what's affecting you? And then once you can figure that out, then you can start building your math from there. And so often businesses are doing this off of, albeit good wisdom, but human wisdom that can't be quantified, can't be scaled. Of one person has a sense that something is going to come through the port or not, and you can't grow like that. It's great to have the strategy, but you can't grow. So our experience is, to break it down to the core principles of what you can, and then you can start building your math.
Makes sense. I feel like so many people don't have all the variables at once, or it's so dynamic. It's hard to continue to, make a formula that makes sense over time. And I think that's one of the challenging parts. I know before
Yeah.
we started recording, we were talking about different tools to try to, decipher all that information and data. We were talking about NetSuite and SAP, and I knew you had mentioned another tool that you recommended. And just kind of curious, how do you look at the landscape when it comes to ERP solutions in terms of ERP software, and at what scale should a brand really be looking at an ERP system like a NetSuite or SAP, or the other one that you were recommending?
I also mentioned Fulfill,
Fulfill.
and Fulfill, yeah. And so when we tack on our own cell stack, when we tack on this onto something, our perspective is that we try to be agnostic. So we try not to care. But to answer your question, the key thing that we're looking for is, what is the interoperability of that platform? And if you go more upscale, then of course the answer is it is going to be more it's going to be ready to go. So Fulfill it's lesser known, but it's a very capable modern ERP platform. And it's probably suitable for medium operations to jump onto because of its cost and its position. But of course, you go up to SAP, and without getting too much into it, and I'm certainly not an SAP guru, it operates a very big piece of the very big pie, and that's another thing. But the key thing here is, it doesn't matter whether it's SAP or Fulfill or NetSuite or anything that I'm not thinking of right this minute. The key thing is it interoperable in real time? And I can tell you that there's some pretty big names out there that they're not formally ERP type platforms at all, but they do operate a significant piece of the, we'll say, financial operations pie, and it does not have this capability. And when you're looking to scale, the key thing is, can I ask my platform for my inventory data in real time? Can I do it or not? And can I do it at scale? Can I do it, in multiple ways? And of course, you can spin this around 10 times, 10 times over. But the key thing is, can I get this information when I want, at scale, and can I do it over and over and over again? And if the answer is, if anywhere along that chain, no, then you should probably be considering another move. And beyond that point, I'm not going to be, overly prescriptive, because that's, then you get into the supply chain, model that business wants to have. And as you said, any of the ones that we just said can be, fantastic for a lot of businesses. The key thing is, are they modern? Are they ready to scale out? And that's where we come in, is bring it and take it out from there and make that experience really work.
Makes sense. I mean, I think it's a lot easier said than done in terms of getting that information in real time. I feel like, that's kind of any supply chain leader's dream, but, it's so hard to determine, how many units you have in stock at your different warehouses, or where, your container is on a certain, container ship. I mean, it's really, there's so many variables that come in to make sure you have a fluid supply chain. And I think, like you said, these systems are really important to make sure you can see the whole picture. But with all the variables, it's, I think, hard to do it in real time. And I want to, kind of, well, it sounds like you're about to say something really, really just to go for it.
I was actually, yeah, because I don't want, I want to make sure that I'm not sounding like I'm oversimplifying. This is something that takes time to evolve. There's one thing, asking for data in real time, and there's another thing, building your mathematical model over availability and so forth. But you just made me think of it, is that especially for operations with multiple warehouses, multiple legal platforms, perhaps for different countries, regions, states, and so forth. These things do evolve, and that's okay. It's all right to have a starting point, and it's all right to also evolve your model to get more and more efficient when it comes to those legal frameworks and regional frameworks and so forth. So be comfortable. It's all right. It's going to take time, and but you improve, and you start, and your team gets comfortable culturally with the model that you're building, and that's when it really starts going.
Makes sense. Let's kind of flip gears here and talk more on the growth and scale side, and maybe give us an example of what, iTristan Group has done to make a supply chain more fluid that enabled more growth. I know, one topic that you like to dive into is understanding how you can, have a full scope of your data that helps you, be prepared for growth. So really curious, what you and your team have done on that side of the table.
The scale, I'm not going to get into the definition of scale, but the challenges to so many businesses can come in different ways. And one that we just talked about was, of course, multi-regional, whether it's like localized or literally legal framework. For example, alcohol sales, which we've been involved with, and you're literally not allowed to ship alcohol from certain states to certain states, and so we had to get into a supply chain logistic. It wasn't huge scale in literal shipments, but it was more complex, because it didn't matter if you were ordering from California. If the shipment was happening from a certain state, you literally weren't allowed to ship it from there. You had to ship it from a different state to. So the logistics were much more, dare I say, artificial, because it didn't really matter if you lived in the same state as the business. It had to be shipped from a different state altogether. So we love diving into those kinds of challenges, because whether we consider it real or not, it's real enough. And so in that way, we love that kind of problem solving, because our sales tech platform, and just us as a group, we love diving into effectively fixing it, and as elegantly as possible, to make it really work. And but the other more obvious one is just the scale of operations. And you can, if you get it right, and coming back to your very first question, is if you get the right availability of inventory as scaled up as possible, you can move a lot of merchandise, and if you do it well, with a high performing system, we were able to give one business their first $1 million day, which they were ecstatic of. They were a smaller SME, so this was the first time they'd hit that number, and it's kind of, they were quite ecstatic to get that. And by I'm not going to say accident, but just by constant progression, the following year we gave the same business in Black Friday, we gave them their first $1 million hour. and that kind of blew us away. So it's like, well, that's a pretty good
That's
evolution
awesome.
within 1 year. Yeah,
Yeah,
but it still comes down to the same principles: is are you making the right stuff available, or
right.
enough of it available?
Just to be able to forecast and have that inventory available to do, that much volume in an hour is incredible in its
Yeah.
own way. And especially probably for the managers or owners to be willing to put that much, money in inventory to be able to have that opportunity to do $1 million an hour in sales on their
Well,
e-commerce brand is amazing.
Well, the interesting thing is that, and this is a sort of another side to the supply chain story that is it's talked about, but not I think it's enough. Is that a lot of this business was not on inventory. A lot of this business, it was on customizable inventory that goes straight out to their customization, effectively manufacturing house,
Mm,
which was local. It was not offshore. So what they had done was they didn't commit to the inventory. They were committing to only part of it. And so what we were able to do was, essentially half of, not half, but probably about 30% of their orders were actually not committed anyway. But it's just another example of like being able to move the data fast enough in the right way, because then you can seize on sales opportunities that may be more profitable, without the upfront commitment too.
that's awesome. I love that. Well, Jason, I'll be wrap up here on e-commerce on tap. Where can people find you? Where can people learn more about the iTristan group?
iTristanmedia.com is our website. I'm on LinkedIn, Jason Agouris, Agouris, and my email, Jason at iTristanmedia.
Awesome. Jason, thank you again. And thank you everyone for listening to this episode of E-commerce on Tap brought to you by Sourcify.